have a negative effect on the behavior of adolescent children. And I'll be looking at my opponent's second game poems. Violent video games reward players for simulating violent behaviors, thus enhancing violent tendencies. Violent video games desensitize players to real-life violence. Exposure to violent video games causes aggressive thoughts and behavior and psychological arousal. Alright, so for her first claim, she said that players are rewarded with points for carrying out aggression, and players have the same visual perspective as the killers or shooters, allowing them to act out as if they were the ones doing the violence. The main point of these games is not to kill the other person, but to accomplish a task or solve a problem. These games are also encourage teamwork, and you get points for reviving your teammate and for helping each other out, not just for killing people. And saying that a person will have the same perspective as a killer, so they will act out as a killer, is just inference. 65% of people in the United States play video games, and if they all had this perspective, then the crime rate would be much higher than it is today. Her secondary claim was violent video games desensitize players to real-life violence. She mentions that the ability to control violent actions could potentially result in the children having a warped perception of reality, giving them the perspective of only the game's point of view. And she mentions Adam Lanza, the Sandy Hook shooter who was obsessed with violent video games, such as Call of Duty, and he would play for 16 hours a day. So Adam Lanza was diagnosed with a form of autism known as Asperger's, and this caused Adam to become detached from society and making him a loner and in need of help. He was also bullied in school. The New York Daily News reported that Adam's mother thought about suing the school because he would come home from school with bruises on multiple occasions. Playing a video game, isolated for 16 hours, seems like a cry for help, a red flag that Adam was depressed and that he needed help. The New York Daily also said that Adam Lanza, his mother, discovered pictures of dead bodies in Adam's room, but she didn't confront him. And a couple of days later, he went out on a shooting spree. So maybe it wasn't a video game that caused him to snap, but it was a product of other factors. Her third point was exposure to violent video games causes aggressive thoughts and behaviors and psychological arousal. And she mentions players of violent video games displayed an increased heart rate and highly elevated skin response immediately after playing the video game. A study published on the online journal Psychology of Violence suggests that it's not the violence in the game that causes aggression, but instead the fact that these games are all highly competitive. And being competitive is a team nature. It goes back a while when we were fighting each other for food and shelter and a mate. Those best able to compete in an environment would survive. We see it all the time in people lose a soccer game or a bet or any other game. The source that my opponent used also had a test that where students blasted each other with loud noises after they played a game, and then they said that after they heard the noise, they got mean. And these noises included like nails on a chalkboard, a dentist drill, and sirens. And this led me to question the effectiveness of this test because I'm not sure who would become friendly after hearing this. So something else worth mentioning is the ESRB ratings on every single game. The electronic software rating boards provide concise and objective information about the content in the video game. Like, mature rated games have lots of blood, violence, and gore, and you have to be 17 or older to buy these games. And if parents are afraid that their child will act out, they shouldn't buy these games that are mature rated in the first place. So just because violent video games are sometimes associated with real life violence, it doesn't mean that the games cause it. Video games are often seen as games in which the purpose is to kill and to kill alone, when in fact it actually consists of teamwork and helping each other out. Many of the school shooters were linked with violent video games, but they also had a history of abuse and mental illness. So to say that video games cause them to act out is ignorant. Video games do not have a negative effect. However, if a person is playing for 16 hours a day and enjoys the actual violence of a game instead of the competition, then that might be a red flag for a serious problem.
For 540? 25, okay, thank you. All right, Jose, the claims are signposted pretty clearly. You do a good job internally, always telling us where you are on the argument. I think that you've got counterclaims and causality challenges that you're making in several places. There's one place where you seem to be challenging the evidence that the advocate used, but I didn't think the challenge was as clear as it could be. On the that's the one where you're talking about, they're playing the different sounds at the games, like the siren and the nails on the chalkboard and that sort of thing. And it's a pretty reasonable press to make, but it's not specific to the particular test that you're talking about. I thought you had a clear explanation on an earlier point where you said that the causality is the competition, that's really the source of the problem that's going on there. And I thought that made a lot of sense. I think you could probably find some other examples. You kind of hinted at one, but I think you should be a little bit clearer at that. I didn't know if that was a quote that you were giving us, or if that was you talking about hinting at that kind of antagonism that builds up. For example, like I'm sure some of you have played with your brother or sister and something didn't go right and they just got pissy and threw over the board or tossed the table or something like that. Has that ever happened to any of you? Mm-hmm. Yeah, there you go. Were you playing a violent video game at the time? No, Monopoly. Well, that's a pretty damn violent game, I'll tell you what, It calls for a lot of violence sometimes. But yeah, so I think the idea that competition is there, I think you need an example like that to illustrate your point, and then you've got a good piece of information there. It didn't sound like you had a source on it. It sounded like it was a generic statement. It's said by some study, and I don't remember if there was a source citation. If there is, you always want to be a little bit sharper about presenting it. All right.